America's white Christian nationalist defense secretary, whose body is covered in neo-Nazi tattoos, Pete Hegseth, whose own mother put into writing, "You, my son, are an abuser of women." She called him a serial abuser of women. And she said, "I'm sick of it." His own mother put it into writing. He held a press conference inside the Pentagon and took questions on Thursday alongside Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. This was the second press conference since last Tuesday's ceasefire. And looking directly into the camera on Thursday, Hegseth addressed the Iranian leadership and declared, "Your capabilities are not the same as ours. Remember, this is not a fair fight." The John Wayne swagger that I talked about from that book, right? He's saying it's not a fair fight. Well, yeah, you're right, Pete. It's not a fair fight because America spends about $1 trillion a year on its military, and Iran spends $25 billion a year. And yet all Iran has to do is shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and we're powerless. That is so unfair. You're right. It's not a fair fight. This war isn't fair. You're right. You're supposed to obey the rules of war by trying to kill everybody, not choke the global energy supply. What does that have to do with our bombs? That's not fair. You changed the rules. We thought we could bomb you into submission, and we spent all this money, and it turns out all you have to do is cut off the Strait of Hormuz. That is not fair. Or at least tell us. Well, they did tell you, but you wanted to kill Muslims. We know who you are, Pete Hegseth. He lied Thursday and said Iran's military arsenal is completely devastated and has no ability to rebuild. Well, it's a lie. Everybody knows it's a lie. If you're following this, despite dropping 13,000 bombs on Iran, America has barely made a dent in their supply of munitions. Some American intelligence estimates say Iran has half their ballistic missiles and mobile missile launchers still intact, and their capacity to manufacture more, including drones, relatively unscathed, since those factories and storage facilities are held inside bunkers carved into the sides of mountains with reinforced steel walls. They have what are called missile cities that American satellites have trouble detecting. They don't know where to bomb, where to drop the bunker buster. You need bunker busters to pierce mountaintops to get to these missile factories and storage facilities. Iran has been preparing for this since 1979. So my question to our alcoholic white Christian nationalist defense secretary is, if Iran's entire military has been eliminated, why is our president so eager to jumpstart peace talks? Why are we negotiating with the Iranians if they have no army, if we've wiped out 90% of their missiles? Why are we negotiating if we won? You're calling this one of the greatest military success stories in American history. So why are we negotiating with the Iranians, and why can't we open the Strait of Hormuz? You turd. You turd. I don't remember America negotiating a ceasefire with the Japanese or Hitler after World War II. They were forced to surrender, which you promised us we would see that. We would see the regime toppled and replaced by Iranians who surrender and say, we'll stop. We're not going to have any nuclear fusion, and we're not going to instigate any trouble with Israel or Saudi Arabia. Where's the surrender? Why are we negotiating a ceasefire? That's what you do when you're at a stalemate, like World War I or Korea. General Lee, one of your heroes, by the way, surrendered at Appomattox. Pastor Doug thinks General Lee was a great man and very good to his slaves, according to Pastor Doug. The Japanese, Pete Hegseth, you turd, the Japanese surrendered in Tokyo Bay aboard the USS Missouri. You promised nothing short of complete and total domination of the Iranian regime and surrender. You've called this the most decisive victory in American military history. Why are you negotiating? Hegseth on Thursday talked tough, playing to the camera, implying that while peace talks are still an option, he said to Iran, quote, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," unquote. Man, that sounds like something out of the movies, because it is, you turd. You're a turd. See, we have leaders playing to the cameras. He's playing to Trump and the Iranians, who see right through him, while he's talking tough. And again, any man who talks tough is a weak man, is a turd. Real men don't have to talk tough. So while he's talking tough, choose wisely. Iran is strategizing like they've been strategizing since 1979, which is storing their missiles and their missile launchers inside mountains, which bunker busters can't permeate. And not only are they strategizing, unlike Pete Hegseth, they have skin in the game. Pete Hegseth doesn't have any skin in the game. And who do you think wins wars? It's the people who want it more. Who do you think wants to win this war in Iran more? Iran or America? Who do you think is going to give everything it can to this war? The same way the North Vietnamese gave everything it had during the Vietnam War. Amnesty International just condemned Iran, and rightfully so. Listen, I'm no fan of this Iranian government. They're enlisting 16-year-olds to fight. Not good. But they're, as they say, in it to win it. We haven't even committed ground troops. We haven't even committed ground troops yet. And already the American people have had it. Enough. New polls are out from CBS and CNN. Only 25% of Americans view this war as a strategic success. 25% of Americans believe your crap. Hegseth on Thursday said the people who report on the war, the reporters, especially members of the press, you're all unpatriotic. He said this while wearing an American flag handkerchief in the breast pocket of his jacket. This is a man who literally blows his nose into the American flag. He's accusing reporters trying to save the lives of our soldiers and civilians, accusing reporters of a lack of patriotism. Who blows their nose into the American flag? Hegseth said what all charlatans say: when you criticize this war, you're insulting our troops. That's what he said, our troops. Well, so far 13 troops have died and 300 have been wounded. And this is before sending in ground troops. Now you got to obey our Pope and call your member of Congress and say, do not support the $200 billion supplemental for this war. So why did 13 of our soldiers die? Why were 300 wounded, Pete Hegseth? Not because the press was reporting the truth, not because some people think this war is a horrible idea. 13 of our soldiers died and 300 were wounded because you're a turd. You're a stupid, arrogant turd. You put our troops in bases throughout the Persian Gulf that weren't sufficiently prepared for Iranian drones and missiles. Just because CBS is reporting the truth about your incompetence, that doesn't mean they're unpatriotic and disrespecting the troops. They're trying to save the lives of more troops by exposing how stupid you are. On March 1st, 2026, the day after the bombing campaign began, and you knew on February 28th that Iran was going to respond, right? So the first thing you want to do if you're defense secretary is protect our troops. We have about 10,000, 15,000 troops stationed in the Persian Gulf, Bahrain, UAE, Saudi Arabia. You want to make sure that they have defensive missiles and they're in barracks that are fortified or have escape routes, or there are ambulances and hospitals nearby. So CBS reported on this, March 1st, 2026. A suicide drone struck a U.S. military base in Kuwait. 6 Army Reserve soldiers were killed, 20 wounded. CBS looked into this. They spoke to the survivors. Pete Hegseth completely let them down. They didn't have access to ambulances or doctors. In fact, they were moved forward towards Iran instead of away. Closer, they were in reach. They call it the X zone, where a missile can hit. They purposely put these soldiers in harm's way. And then when the drone hit, they didn't have no ambulances, no doctors, no medics. They had to commandeer civilian cars. Wounded, they had to jump into cars of civilians and drive to a nearby hospital. That's how much preparation Pete Hegseth put into this war. But if you criticize the way he's conducting the war, you're criticizing the troops. It's unpatriotic. Oldest game in the book. Doesn't work on Americans anymore, you turd. We're on to you. No, Pete Hegseth, you're the one who hates our troops. You think they're disposable, they're expendable, little playthings. You're the one who hides behind them, the flag and the Bible. You lie, and you say we're winning. No, we're not winning. And when you say we're winning, that endangers the lives of our soldiers. You know, I don't know what you know. We know you can't win wars by dropping bombs. You have to, unfortunately, send in ground troops. And if you want to win this thing, hundreds of thousands of ground troops going door to door in Iran. And even if you do that, you know, like in Gaza or Vietnam, Iraq, we didn't send in 100,000 ground troops. We did it on the cheap. But if you're going to have ground troops going door to door, there are going to be massive casualties, and we're going to lose because our soldiers don't want to be there, and the people, they don't know why we're there. You haven't figured out what the reason is. Same way George W. Bush never came up with a reason for going into Iraq. Soldiers don't want to be there, and the people we're supposedly rescuing, the Iranians, they don't want us there either. Why are you negotiating a ceasefire, Pete Hegseth, if this is one of the greatest military victories in American history? A ceasefire means it's a stalemate. Up until the ceasefire, the Iranian military, which you said had been completely wiped out, was able to fire a total of 15 to 20 ballistic missiles a day into Israel and the Persian Gulf. And by the way, and I'm not rooting for Iran, I don't like these guys, especially since they killed some of our soldiers. Iran has no allies. Iran is taking on the United States, Israel, and at the same time lobbing missiles and sending suicide drones into Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar. They've killed U.S. soldiers. So they're doing this all by themselves. We have allies. We have Israel, and we have all the other countries in the Persian Gulf. Iran, they're like Trump, essentially. They've pissed off everybody. And they've killed U.S. soldiers. They've destroyed several of our very expensive airships and our entire embassy in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. They've wiped out nearly 30% of Qatar's liquid natural gas infrastructure. It's going to take 5 to 10 years to rebuild that. This is like within 3 weeks of the war, they took out Qatar's liquid natural gas, or at least 30% of it. Iran is taking on the world, or at least the Persian Gulf, Israel, and the United States by themselves. Yes, Russia and China are supplying Iran with weapons and intelligence. We know Russia is providing cheap and sophisticated suicide drones, which was originally Iran's technology, but the Russians improved upon it in Ukraine. We know China now is selling satellite technology to the Iranians. That's one of the chief reasons the Iranians have been able to destroy pretty much all of our U.S. military bases in the Persian Gulf. It's one of the deep, dark secrets that eventually will come out, and that is our military bases are uninhabitable, thanks to Iran, thanks to their airstrikes, and thanks to lack of preparation. We're putting soldiers up in barracks that are easily accessible by drones and missiles. That's why we're putting a lot of our soldiers are staying in hotels and apartment buildings, which is a violation of the Geneva Conventions. You're not allowed to house soldiers with civilians. So it also turns out that as much as Pete Hegseth said today, they're out. We took out their missile launchers, and they're not running out of munitions. They don't waste. They absorb a lot of pain, like Ali against Foreman, Rumble in the Jungle. Ali waited until Foreman was all punched out. And so Iran is taking massive amounts of punishment, but as I said, intelligence estimates say Iran has yet to bring out its big guns. Iran has ballistic missiles. They fired one at Diego Garcia. It landed in the ocean, but it proved we have stuff that can hit London. If we can hit right off the coast of Diego Garcia, we can hit London. It hasn't even touched those, and we don't know how many they have. It has an unlimited supply of short-range missiles that make it impossible for American warships to seize Hormuz without sustaining massive casualties. You can't send ships into the Strait of Hormuz and expect them to use interceptors to knock short-range missiles out of the sky. They need more time. Plus, those ships are going to be swarmed by suicide drones and suicide submersibles. You cannot do that without sustaining massive casualties. So they're not running out. But you know who's running out of munitions? We are, Pete Hegseth. America, the Persian Gulf, Israel. We're running out of missiles. We've used up, by the way, this would be considered unpatriotic, what I'm saying. Pete Hegseth, why do you hate America? Why do you hate America? Why do you want to go into war completely unprepared? Why do you want our soldiers to be slaughtered because of your incompetence? We're running out. We've used up 25% of our Tomahawk missiles. About in 4 weeks, we used up 25%. It takes 2 years to replenish them. In other words, if the war continues, by the end of the year, we will not have any more Tomahawks or interceptors. Israel is being forced to ration its interceptors. What the Iranians did was they didn't bring out their big guns. They sent in $20,000, $30,000 drones into Israel and the Persian Gulf, and Israel, the United States, and the Persian Gulf started burning through $3 million interceptors. Our supposed allies in the Persian Gulf, Pete, are turning to Ukraine for Zelensky's low-cost but sophisticated technology that they're using to shoot down missiles and drones that were originally designed by the Iranians. And the Persian Gulf has begun buying drones and anti-missile drones from Ukraine. They're buying from Great Britain and South Korea. And why is that, Pete Hegseth? Well, had you listened to our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who told you not to do this, you would have known that our military-industrial complex can't keep up with the demand. And you know how I know that? Because every respected military analyst in America is saying that. You know who said that in 2024? Our vice president when he was running for president. He was saying we can't give money and weapons to Ukraine because our military-industrial complex can't keep up with the demand. J.D. Vance said, I'm against giving weapons to Ukraine because the military-industrial complex can't keep up with demand. And you were told that, Pete Hegseth, by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff a week before you, Donald Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu decided to do this. Everybody else said no. So if you want to know who to blame for this war, it's Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu. And then you blame everybody else in the administration who refused to quit in protest. During his press conference on Thursday, Pete Hegseth, who is a turd, said, wasn't asked, he volunteered this, that America has an unlimited supply, a bottomless cup of missiles and interceptors. He wasn't asked about this. He volunteered that information, which means he felt he needed to say that, right? The same way Donald Trump has to insist he's a billionaire. If you're a billionaire, you don't want people to know you're a billionaire. If you have a unlimited supply of missiles and interceptors, you don't need to tell anybody that. Without being asked, he tipped his hand. And it's worth watching the press conference because you can see a frightened, weak little boy. You can tell. This is why he's an alcoholic. He's a frightened little man. There was a little tremble in Pete Hegseth's voice Thursday morning, and he attempted to disguise the tremble by lowering his voice, and it only made him sound weaker. Because somewhere deep below the folds of insanity, he knows he screwed up. Again, he was the only one who thought this war was a good idea, and Trump. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, week before the February 28th attacks began, he warned Trump and Hegseth, this is going to be bad. We have major logistical issues that cannot be resolved in such short time. And the number one logistical issue, we don't have enough munitions. It's in the Washington Post. And then Dan Kane said, you can't do this without our allies. You can't just do it with Israel. We will run out of munitions very quickly. And we have. Dan Kane should have quit on February 28th. Marco Rubio should have quit. Radcliffe, the head of the CIA, who called it farcical, should have quit. So why are we running low on munitions when we have the greatest weapons in the world? But we do. We do have amazing killing machines, but we do it for profit. And our weapon manufacturers, they earn billions, not just from the United States. We're not their only customer. See, Turns out our weapons manufacturers, they don't really love America. They love money. They're not just making weapons for America. They're making missiles and interceptors for Israel, South Korea, the Persian Gulf, and all the other countries Congress gets lobbied into saying, it's okay, you can sell weapons to them too. We sell fighter jets and bombs all over the world. So when we go to war, it's unfair to our military-industrial complex to expect our weapons industry to worry only about the needs of the American soldier. They have to honor contracts they have with Germany, France, Italy, and all those new NATO countries that joined NATO after Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Finland and Sweden. Finland joined NATO in 2023. Sweden joined it in 2024. And here's the beauty. This is why it's really good to be in the weapons business. I'm thinking certainly Don Jr. and Eric went into it. They're sitting on the board of a drone manufacturer trying to get contracts with the U.S. military. So in order to become a member of NATO, in order to be a beneficiary of Article 5, which says an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, in order to join NATO, this protection racket, you must agree as a country to spend at the very least 2% of your entire economy on your military. You have to spend at least 2%. So you have to spend it on your soldiers, and you got to buy weapons. Got to buy lots and lots of weapons. And to prove you're serious about defense, you have to promise to spend at least 2% of your GDP on weapons and the military. In other words, we don't care if you find a way to defend your country and NATO cheaper or more efficiently. You know, the way Zelensky did in Ukraine with his bottom dollar drone technology, which we're desperate for. No, you cannot do what Zelensky did and figure out how to do it on the cheap. You have to spend at least 2% of your entire economy on the military. Weapons, tanks, bombs. Doesn't matter if you find a way to do it better and cheaper, you have to spend 2%. It's like when your father was on a business trip and they gave him an expense account. He had to spend it. If anybody had a father who sometimes had an expense account and go, I have to spend this or keep it. It was spent the minute they gave it to him. So that means Finland, who just joined NATO, they have to spend 2%, at least 2%. And Finland and Sweden, they're new. They're spending like 2.3, 2.4% of their entire economy on the military. They just paid billions and billions of dollars to Lockheed Martin. That's an American company. They bought 64 U.S.-made F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters. Well, that's billions and billions of dollars, but they don't come with missiles. So you got to buy missiles. AIM-120D3 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles to arm the F-35s. That's going to cost you a couple billion a year. Well, Lockheed Martin has to deliver those missiles, and whoever makes those missiles, Lockheed Martin has to deliver the stealth fighters to Finland. They have the contract. We're at war with Iran. Sorry, we love America, but we have to honor our commitments overseas. Sweden, billions. They just joined the NATO. Billions on U.S. Patriot missiles to knock Russian missiles out of the sky. Now, those Patriot missiles, we now know, $3 billion, $4 billion each. Zelensky can sell you something for maybe $20,000, $30,000. But you're not allowed. You have to spend at least 2% of your economy on military. So You're not allowed to buy Patriot missiles. You're not allowed to buy a substitute for Patriot missiles. You can't buy something for $40,000. You got to pay $3 million each. So right now, these are General Dan Kane said this. Our vice president, who was against this war, said this. Our military industrial complex can't meet the demand. And the military industrial complex here in the United States isn't going to help, because what are these wars really about? Profits. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, they changed their name to something else. All of a sudden, we're supposed to sacrifice for war? Especially since this war, if you're running a weapons company, this war is a bad investment, because America is running out of weapons and money. So if you're looking for your best customers, America, your own country, we ain't it. In order to keep this war in Iran going, Congress has to approve a $200 billion war supplemental on top of the $1.5 trillion Trump wants to give the Pentagon for fiscal year 2027. That doesn't include a war. That's just for the Pentagon. If you want a war, you have to pass supplementals. So if you're running Lockheed Martin or Boeing or Raytheon, you're thinking, gee, I don't see that war supplemental getting passed. That's a bad investment. For us to give up money on the table, we have money on the table with Sweden, Korea, Finland. We should delay the delivery of those weapons because America's at war. But we do that. Why would we piss off our good customers when America isn't going to be a good customer? I don't think that $200 billion war supplemental is going to get passed. So if you're running a weapons company, you're not going to help the Pentagon. So while Pete Hegseth lies and says we have plenty of munitions, he's in a panic, which is why, most of you know this already, he is meeting with General Motors and Ford and Detroit, telling them to retool and get into the weapons business. He says the same way we retooled the economy during World War II, we have to retool Detroit. Have you read about this? It started yesterday. If we have an unlimited supply of weapons, Pete Hegseth, why are you going to Detroit and telling them to start turning this into a wartime economy? During World War II, Detroit stopped making cars. They began manufacturing tanks and fuselages for airplanes, trucks, ammunition. And Hegseth is talking with Detroit, telling them it's time for car makers to get back on a wartime footing. It was different when Biden was president. The government was helping automakers transition to electric vehicles, get them off petroleum. And Biden was saving jobs by imposing strategic tariffs on Chinese car batteries to protect the battery manufacturers here in the United States. Biden used tariffs. The Chinese can make batteries cheaper than we can. So Biden said we have to get off the internal combustion engine, and we're going to support Detroit by making it impossible to sell Chinese batteries in the United States. Trump, of course, got elected calling that a hoax. And within 1 year, Detroit was no longer encouraged by the government to get off the internal combustion engine. And that's why China right now is surpassing the United States when it comes to electric vehicles. All the tax incentives to buy one of Elon Musk's cars, gone. What is the rescue plan for Detroit as if this war doesn't come to an end and we enter into a massive recession, if not depression? What will be the rescue plan for Detroit? Well, it won't be a government bailout. Instead, the Pentagon will pay Detroit to make military hardware in order to sustain a war for oil in the Persian Gulf so that Detroit can still make cars that run on oil that nobody wants to buy. That's what Trump is doing. he's killing the auto industry and the planet, but in the service of the oil companies who keep racking up record profits. He doesn't care about Detroit. He cares about the oil companies, and this is about oil, not cars. When Trump was running in 2024, he summoned our nation's top oil executives to Mar-a-Lago and told them, you guys need to give me $1 billion, my political action, my super PAC, $1 billion. He said, you donate $1 billion to my super PAC, it will be the greatest investment you ever made. Well, they didn't donate $1 billion. They donated a lot, and it was the greatest investment they've ever made. The war in Venezuela, for oil, this. I mean, come on. You shut down Hormuz, price of oil doubles, and you're ExxonMobil. What more could you ask for? When Biden and Obama passed their massive stimulus packages, Republicans complained. They say the federal government shouldn't be in the business of picking winners and losers in the marketplace. But Trump, Bush, they pick winners and losers, but there's only really one winner. The oil companies and the defense industry. And the losers are you and me paying for all of it. They are looting our treasury. We're paying for it. But it's unpatriotic. It's unfair to the troops. You're disrespecting the troops if you criticize our turd defense chief, Pete Hegseth, for willing to sacrifice our men and women so he can get tumescent by killing Iranians. Anyway, back to our war criminal. He is a war criminal. Here he is talking tough to Iran, right? So we won the war, but we're still negotiating. Here he is giving Iran some tough love. Hello?
We urge this new regime to choose wisely.
It's not a new regime. You didn't topple the regime. You're a liar, okay? Choose wisely. Very condescending from someone who has zero power over the Iranians. Here's Hegseth threatening to commit war crimes again. And in the articles of impeachment introduced by Congresswoman Ansari, threatening war crimes is a war crime.
But it's not destroyed yet. Your energy industry is not destroyed yet.
Yet. He's saying, we're going to destroy your entire power structure. We're going to turn off your lights. That's a war crime. Okay. More from the turd.
You like to say publicly, Iran, that you control the Strait of Hormuz, but you don't have a navy or real domain awareness. You can't control anything.
Right. Which is why we're negotiating a ceasefire, because they can't control anything. You can't control anything. Trump can't control his bowels, and you can't control anything. And everything with Pete Hegseth is about control. Control over his children, women, his inability to control his drinking. Go ahead.
To be clear, threatening to shoot missiles and drones at ships, commercial ships that are lawfully transiting international waters, that is not control. That's piracy. That's terrorism.
Ah, you figured it out. It's terrorism. You're right. It's terrorism. Well, first, by the way, I'll get to the terrorism part in a second. According to The Guardian, the U.S. launches its fifth strike on alleged Pacific drug boat in a week, killing 3. That's piracy. That's terrorism. Operation Southern Spear, which Pete Hegseth is so proud of, total death toll since he launched this campaign, at least 177 people have been killed in airstrikes on alleged narco-terrorists in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. We know he did a double tap, killed survivors. I mean, there are war crimes. We've been over. There's no time to go over. Okay, so he said firing on ships is terrorism. It's economic terrorism, piracy. And there is no military solution to terrorism. Let me repeat. It's what John Kerry the Democratic nominee for president lectured George W. Bush with during their debate in 2004 when Bush was running for re-election. John Kerry, who served in Vietnam, said there is no military solution to terrorism. The way you solve terrorism is working with the international police, international intelligence agencies. That's how you combat terrorism, with an occasional strategically targeted missile. So the illegal war in Iraq and the illegal war in Afghanistan. Now, we were told we had to go into Afghanistan because they were behind 9/11. George W. Bush wanted a war. He lied and said the Taliban were behind 9/11. A month after 9/11, before we began bombing, the Taliban, which was in charge of Afghanistan, they said, we can find bin Laden. We know where he is. He's in the hills of Tora Bora, going back and forth between Pakistan. We can seal off the hills. We can get him. And we'll put him on trial here in Afghanistan in one of our courts. And you provide evidence that he was behind the 9/11 attacks. Give us the evidence. And Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld said, no, you know where he is, hand him over. On October 7th, a week later, the Taliban, their ambassador in Pakistan, said, we will go find bin Laden. We'll put him on trial if the U.S. will supply evidence and help us in the trial. White House said, no, hand him over, not to be negotiated. On October 14th, we began bombing Afghanistan. And the deputy prime minister of Afghanistan, was like the number 3 guy there, said, we're ready to give you bin Laden. We'll find him. Some of the warlords have a rough idea of where he is. But we have to hand him over to a neutral third party for a trial. We don't trust the United States to give Osama bin Laden a fair trial. And George W. Bush said, this is non-negotiable. And the rest is history repeating itself. They wanted a war. Rumsfeld said, I don't want to do Afghanistan. I want to do Iraq. It's target rich. George Tenet, who was the head of the CIA, he slam dunk George Tenet. He said the CIA they knew where bin Laden was by about 2 months after 9/11. And they said, just help us seal the pass between Tora Bora and Pakistan. We can get him. We can trap him there. And reportedly, and again, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but there is reporting on this, that Donald Rumsfeld said, I don't want the CIA to get bin Laden. I want the military to get him. And this goes back to what John Kerry said. There isn't a military solution to terrorism. It should have been the CIA who went in to Tora Bora, but Donald Rumsfeld wanted to drop bombs. Whatever they tell you, whenever they say we're going to war, whatever reasons they give you are effing lies. They are lies. We know Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. We know the Taliban, Afghanistan, had nothing to do with 9/11. Osama bin Laden never put on trial. Couldn't be a trial. Could not be a trial. He had to be killed. You know that. Could not have a trial. That's why we have conspiracy theories. Why was bin Laden eventually killed by the CIA in Abbottabad, Pakistan, where he's a hero to this day among many Pakistanis? Why was Osama bin Laden living happily ever after, or at least for 10 years after 9/11 in Pakistan, if Afghanistan was the country that attacked us on 9/11? Here's something interesting, then I'll wrap it up. That's George W. Bush declaring war on Iraq. Behind him, to his right, is Dick Cheney. To his left is Republican Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert, who just got out of prison for molesting children. Kind of interesting. Interesting. All right, I should wrap it up, but since I'm not going to wrap it up, we're going to look at some maps because Pete Hegseth is a turd. So I just want to go over this with you. This is the nuts and bolts here. And because we don't look at maps, we end up fighting forever wars. But I do have to give Donald Trump credit. This isn't a forever war. We seem to have lost it in 5 weeks. Okay, so what are we looking at? That is the Middle East. That's the Persian Gulf. You see the Persian Gulf in the middle, then Gulf of Oman, the Arabian Sea. To the left, you have the Red Sea. Well, let's look at that. That's Iran. Okay, we're fighting Iran. Okay, and right next door to Iran is Afghanistan. You see that? And right there is the Strait of Hormuz. Right there is where 20%, 25% of the world's oil, 30 to 40% of the world's fertilizer must pass through. See the Persian Gulf to the left? See all those Persian Gulf states? Kuwait, Iraq, Iran, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain. They can't get their oil out unless they go through the Persian Gulf. Saudi Arabia can go through the Red Sea, but all their oil is to the east, and it's hard to get it to the Red Sea. All right, that's the Red Sea, and Red Sea is very important because that's the Suez Canal, and Europe and Asia can't trade unless they pass through the Suez Canal. And right there is the Bab el-Mandab Strait. In order to get into the Red Sea and pass through the Suez Canal, you must go through the Bab el-Mandab Strait. That's Yemen. That's where the Houthi fighters are taking on Saudi Arabia, and they're being helped by Iran. Okay? So you got your Iran, mostly Shia nation. You got Yemen, now run by the Houthis, who are Shia. And you got Saudi Arabia, which is Sunni. Saudi Arabia hates Iran and the Houthis down in Yemen. And you see that? It's the Houthis in Yemen who can clog the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Again, Iran, Strait of Hormuz. That's it. Look at the geography here. Strait of Hormuz, okay? Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz. Persian Gulf, on the left, the Red Sea, Strait of Hormuz. Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz.
You like to say publicly, Iran, that you control the Strait of Hormuz, but you don't have a navy.
You see, you're stupid because they don't need a navy. Here we go. Ready? Here's why they don't need a navy, turd. Strait of Hormuz. Right there, Strait of Hormuz. Above the Strait of Hormuz, see that? Those are mountains. See that? And inside those mountains somewhere are buried missile launchers and short-range missiles. And you see, you sail through the Strait of Hormuz, and they're mobile missile launchers, so they can bring them out from underneath the mountain, fire down, and all it takes is one ship to get blown up, and Lloyd's of London will not insure a tanker. That's all it takes. You don't need a navy, and you were told that, schmucko.
You like to say publicly, Iran, that you control the Strait of Hormuz, but you don't have a navy or real domain awareness.
Domain awareness. That sounds smart, but what he's saying is you're not aware of the map. The map. He's telling Iran to look at the map. Well, you go first, turd. See, that's Iran. That's Strait of Hormuz. That's the Red Sea. That's the Suez Canal. And they do have domain awareness because they can get the Houthis in Yemen in alliance with Iran, who are fighting with Saudi Arabia, to close not just the Strait of Hormuz, but the Bab el-Mandab Strait. And if the Bab el-Mandab Strait closes, you can't access the Suez Canal. You can close the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandab Strait without a navy. Douchebag.
You can't control anything.
You can't control anything. But you're going to try and get as many American soldiers and civilians killed. And you don't care because you got a hard-on for killing Muslims because that's the only way you can get hard. Get rid of him. They can't impeach him, but get rid of this turd. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Sorry the show went long again. I don't know how to do this without, I had to show you the maps because I talked to people. I don't know the maps. So I can't pretend to be smarter or know stuff that I don't know. So I haven't really looked at these maps. And so I shared those maps with you. If more of us were familiar with geography, maybe we know not to get into these stupid wars, which you can't win unless you drop a thermonuclear weapon. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. Leave a comment. How long was this show? 2 hours. So if I made a mistake, please correct me. I issue corrections. I triple check. But if I made a mistake, please correct me. Please like this episode. By the way, this is the stuff you're supposed to say at the top of the show. So they say, you got to say this at the beginning of the show. You got to ask people to subscribe to your channel and to hit the notification bell at the top of the show, not now. Subscribe to my newsletter, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to, well, what else? It's so effing hot in here. All right. All that stuff. My next show will be Sunday at 6:05 p.m. We're trying to keep a schedule here because it's unfair to Bob and Mila and the people in the chat room for me to keep an irregular schedule. So what we're doing is 6:05 p.m. live, Sunday night Eastern, Tuesday night Eastern, and Thursday night Eastern. And 8:30 p.m. Eastern, we're clipping a highlight, little short highlight, which we post. That's what we're doing. It is so hot. Thank you.